in situations that are challenging, we tend to think, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening? You know, like, why are these things happening at work that are negative? Or why is it that I'm always arguing with my spouse or my friend or my partner? Why is this happening? You know, this is always happening to me. And it sort of goes a little bit to sometimes to victimism, whereas you feel as though it's always happening to me. When in reality, a lot of situations in our life are happening for us. And it's happening for us so that perhaps we can take ourselves out of the situation where we feel like it's happening to us. So if you think about, you know, what that means in your life, it can mean a really powerful shift. Because if you're able to start shifting to this situation happened to me, not to me, but it happened for me. But what did it happen for me? And that's the part where you really have to dig a little deeper and really look at everything around you. Because one of the things that I believe that is important for everyone to think about and to understand is that your struggles that you have in your life really aren't punishments. We tend sometimes to think of them as punishments, but they really aren't. You may tell yourself, I'm being punished, but the reality is you're not being punished. Because if you can look at that and say, why is that happening? Then you can go a little deeper with that. The other situation is shifting your perspective, is that you could open a new view, a new perspective, or even like we call it a portal, like a new understanding of information or a new understanding of the situation. The other reason that things happen for us is that my belief is that they are spiritual invitations. It's an invitation to dig a little deeper into who am I spiritually, and what can I do about this? And then the other step in this is that when something occurs in your life, it could be a seed that's going to lead you to your higher self, or to your higher purpose, or to really even beginning to discover, I have a purpose. You know, I never thought about it this way, but I have a purpose. So when a situation occurs, you want to really step into sort of a questioning session with yourself. You know, the first question we always ask is, why is this happening to me? That's the very first question. So if you really get into this, is that, you know, it's a deeper truth. It can bring you to a deeper truth. So, you know, what happens is you can grow, you can evolve, you can see things differently, you can begin to shift perhaps an energy of negativity and start to see something that's even more positive in your life. So let me give you some examples. So let's think about maybe a woman grows up with an abusive parent. And you know, that's a hard one because it's challenging, it's sad, and especially if you're a child and you feel like as you've grown up as a teenager that you were being abused, whether it was verbally, physically, or mentally by a parent. But the reality is you can ask yourself, even as you get to become an adult, why did this happen to me? But if you can shift that perspective and say, well, perhaps it wasn't a positive situation, it wasn't good, but maybe it happened for me. Because you find yourself perhaps being drawn to help others who've gone through the same situation. Or you realize that I have a body of knowledge of things that have happened to me, and I don't want that to happen again. And I don't, number one, if I choose to have children, I certainly don't want to inflict that on my own children. I want to shift that in a different way. So what I want to do is be loving and caring and compassionate. And so you can shift yourself that way. And or you can start to recognize that you could help other children or other adults or other individuals that have gone through the same situation. And that's all because you look at something as, this happened for me for a reason. There was a reason in this. Think about, and maybe you've been in this situation, think about being in a toxic job. Now, I myself can relate to that. I was in a situation once where I was in a very toxic environment, and I was in a fairly high-level position. And I felt like I was always having to fight for, my opinions, my suggestions, my management, the things that I was doing in my role in this company. But the company itself had a lot of toxic people. And I felt as though I was always battling. I was always having to defend myself. I was always having to explain. And it just got worse and worse. And I actually was asking myself, why is this happening? I feel like I'm a good manager. I feel like I'm taking care of my particular department. And we seem to all have good things going on. But everything outside of me and around me in this company is very toxic, very negative. And I actually asked the question, is it me? Is it something I'm doing? But I came to the conclusion that I didn't think it was. But I knew that there was all this toxicity around me. And finally, it got to the point to where I was even beginning to get sick. And I was working long hours. I was basically fighting, pushing, and the whole time thinking, why is this happening to me? Until one day I said, you know what? This can't happen anymore. I can't deal with this anymore. And so I resigned. And I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I had 2 small children at the time. I was divorced and I had 2 small children. And I was in a very tiny town in North Carolina. And I really wasn't sure, what my next step was going to be. And 3 days later, I get a phone call from a major corporation that says, hey, we hear that you left your job. And we're really glad to hear that, because we've really wanted to solicit you for a position here in Atlanta. But we couldn't solicit you because you are our clients, and we're not allowed with the corporation to solicit people to take on roles in our company. And I was like, really? And not only was I being solicited, where they offered me a position, it was much more money than what I was making. It was an amazing job, and I got to move to Atlanta. So I was able to look back at that and say, wow, I'm really glad that senior officer didn't like me, because he pushed me out. But he pushed me into a better job. And it was a better job. And it was a job that I stayed in for 10 years. And it was a job where I also had the opportunity to totally awaken my spiritual self and realize that once I was done with this corporate role, that eventually I was going to step out into an entrepreneurial role. So there have been many days in my lifetime that I have thanked that toxic, negative chief officer in the company that didn't like me from the day he came on board. And I sat around going, why is this happening to me? Whereas now I can say, wow, that happened for me. That happened to push me out so that I could be in a better place. And I will tell you, I now look back at situations in my life where I can now look at things and say, oh, this is happening for me. And I need to step into that. I need to totally take a look at this in a different perspective. So when you have a challenge that comes up in your life, I want you to think about, how could I shift this? How could I think about, this is happening for me, not to me? Yeah, it's happening right there, but it is for you to look at something different. So, so why does this happen? Why do we have these situations? I've said this before, I say it just about in every Soul Sunday. I believe that we are eternal light beings, that we are energy. We are here to shine our light. We're here to go on a journey. We're here to walk our path, to hopefully step into a purpose. It doesn't have to be a huge purpose. It can be any kind of purpose. Because even if in things that you do, if you impact one person in your life, that's really what it's all about. You don't have to go out and impact hundreds or thousands or millions of people. If you're meant to do that, then I say step into that. And to a certain extent, we dim our light. We dim our light. We don't want people to really see us. We look at all these situations around us. This happened to me. I can't let my light shine. I have to dim my light. I have to be invisible. Oh, this is happening to me. These people don't like me. I'm in the wrong job, or I have the wrong family. The reality is that you're on a journey. You're here to uplift yourself for a higher purpose and to live life fully and to find peace. And I believe live in joy and to be joyful. So a lot of reasons that you go through what you go through is because it's pushing you to step into your highest self. And sometimes it may take a lifetime to figure that out. Some people are born with knowing immediately what's my purpose. They never look at any situation saying, this is happening to me. They're always going, this is happening for me, and I'm going to step forward. I'm going to step into this. I'm going to really look at things with a different perspective. So what would be one of the ways to start to work on yourself with this? The first way would be start looking for the silver lining in everything that you feel is negative. And I'm going to say even in tragic situations, because yes, we have horrible situations that occur in this world. We have situations where, people pass. We have situations where there are plane crashes. We have situations where someone just gets sick. And you think, why did this happen? This couldn't happen. But in every one of those situations, there is a silver lining. As much as we don't want to look at it, as much as we don't want to think that there's a silver lining. I mean, think about people that have had something tragic in their life and then they turn it into a nonprofit and they go out and they help others. I mean, think about, we know that we have programs in the world that support people when they're going through challenging times. And sometimes the best people to help others are the people who've gone through those challenges. Counselors who are going through their own personal situations that they want to overcome become the best counselors for that same situation. You have counselors that maybe as a child were abused and they become a great counselor that helps abused individuals. So you can always look at anything in your life and say, is this driving me? Is this pushing me to step into this? Because sometimes we're not confident. Sometimes we think, oh no, I'm a fraud or I'm an imposter. I can't possibly step into this purpose. But the way that you can truly step into your purpose in your own life is to start to recognize that there are things that will happen for you that will help you on your path, that will help you actually grow and develop and see things in a different way. So the other thing that you can look at is start to look at patterns in your life. are the same things happening over and over? I mean, do you truly recognize when you go through a pattern and then you're like, gee, it happened again, you know? Let's talk about relationship. People get into relationship, and we were talking about that earlier this morning about developing a good relationship. But think about if you've had situations in your life where you keep getting involved with the same kind of person, the same kind of individual that keeps repeating the same things that don't work for you. And you have to ask yourself, well, what can I do differently? Or maybe it's something I need to shift. Maybe it's something I need to look at, because if I'm bringing in the same type of person, perhaps that maybe isn't being honest with me each time I develop a relationship, then I need to change that. That's happening for me to look at that I'm attracting people that aren't honest. So what can I do differently to attract people that are honest? The moment you start acknowledging that, the moment you start looking at what the patterns are, not only with yourself but outside of yourself, then you'll start to recognize what actually is happening in your life. And this is where you start to shift and change your perspective of perhaps who you are, what you want to do in your life, and the kind of life that you want to live. So let's think about how we could reframe some of these things. So let's say, as an example, someone says, I was betrayed by someone I trusted. You know, that happened to me. How could you look at how this happened for you? I learned how to trust my intuition and choose aligned relationships. So you can reframe what you think is happening to you. Another one, my job laid me off. I was freed from what I wasn't meant for me so I could go follow my calling in my career. And that does happen. Sometimes people do get laid off immediately. I mean, right now, we have a lot of people, you know, it's in the news, people are getting laid off. People get laid off every day, every single day. There are companies, even small businesses, that have to let people go maybe because they're downsizing or because maybe the employee violated something that they just didn't conform to the rules or the guidelines in the company. But the point is that if everyone asks himself a question, you know, what am I really meant to do? Obviously, this wasn't the right place for me because they either didn't want me there or I messed up there and I had to go. You really have to ask yourself that. And if you can reframe that and say, I'm free. You know, we had someone that was in our circle one week and they had lost their job. And I actually made a comment about, wow, that's great. And that person was like, oh, no, it's not. You know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I should look for jobs here. Should I look somewhere else? I just don't know what to do, and I'm just very upset. And I said, well, let's reframe that. What if, because you've lost your job and you have a good position, like there's what you do would be very valuable to a lot of companies. And I said, but have you ever thought about where you really want to live? Like, are you tied down here? Do you have family? Do you have children? Do you have someone you have to take care of? And they were like, no, just me. And I'm like, so you could live anywhere in the world you wanted to live, right? You could move to that place you've always wanted to live. But instead, you're worrying right now about, I got to get a job right now. Why? Why? Because you could go anywhere you want. I actually had someone ask me one time, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you want to live? And I'd never thought about that. I was like, I guess right here. But then I started thinking, no, actually, and one of my favorite places is Hawaii. And I said, actually, I think I'd love to live in Hawaii. And then this person said to me, well, have you ever thought about, what about maybe would you like to live in Europe? Would you like to live in Paris? Would you like to live, in some really exotic, beautiful place? And I was like, well, I never thought about that. I like Hawaii. It seems exotic to me. But now that you brought up other countries, maybe I'd really like to live in another country. And then the question was, what's stopping you? What's stopping you? And I had to think about that because I had a lot of excuses of what would be stopping me, but they were just excuses. And realistically, that was with someone that I'd been seeing for quite some time, and he was in a position to where we could live anywhere where we wanted to live. Now, I started thinking more about that, and then I realized over time that wasn't the person for me. And not that he didn't inspire me, because he did, but I also realized that he opened up my mind to think about where would I really want to live. And I was able to reframe that. So I want you to think about when a situation occurs in your life that you feel like this is happening to me. Maybe something negative happens. I mean, think about something simple like, okay, somebody steals your identity. You're like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Because that's a negative situation. But you want to ask yourself, okay, what can I learn from this? How can this happen for me? And maybe it meant that you really weren't protecting yourself as much as you thought. You hadn't changed some passwords. Again, that's a simple situation. But if you can look at it as, I'm going to step back into this and I'm going to make sure that I'm setting boundaries and I'm protecting myself. Because some of these things do happen for us to take a look at situations. It goes back to if you know that you're supposed to accomplish something and you just every day you go, I just don't want to accomplish this, or I just don't want to do this. Well, ultimately it doesn't get done. And what happens is there's a reason, you're kind of saying, oh, this is happening, I don't want to deal with it. But the reality is if you can think about, I need to accomplish this situation because it's going to be for me. It's going to help me move forward. So think about some times that maybe you have had situations where something happened and you went to that place of, why did this happen to me? Even a simple car accident. I mean, again, that happens. Even if it's just a small fender bender, you can ask yourself, why did this happen to me? Now, it may be that you just had to get your car fixed, and that was it. But you never know. You might meet someone that you really realize you liked. You might meet someone that imparts words of wisdom to you. And I know I've had situations like that where a little something happens and then I end up meeting someone that became a good friend, or hearing words of wisdom from someone that meant something to me or had value. And I think that we sometimes take these kinds of situations for granted because we go to the place of victimism, or we go to the place of, oh, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? So I want you to think about that, like I said before, you're not being punished, you're being positioned, if you think of it that way. You're not cursed, you're being sculpted. You're being sculpted into the person that you truly want to be. And we don't often think about, again, who do we want to be? And how can we impact others so that they can think the way that we're talking about this morning, that they're going, oh wow, that happens for me. Maybe someone goes to Rebecca and has a chair massage, and they have a moment where they go, wow, that happened because that was for me. That was for me to see something or feel something or have an epiphany or an awakening. It could be someone who's a coach says something that makes an impact on you. Or you're just having a conversation with a stranger and that stranger says something to you that you're like, wow, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that information. I know many times I used to travel a lot in my former job, and I was on an airplane all the time. And so I met a lot of strangers. And I really enjoyed just having conversations with people because I learned things. And a lot of times I got a lot of wisdom that came forth, that when people talked about their lives or talked about their situations, I wanted to hear what they had to say. I wanted to listen. And I feel like that I actually even began to become the person that I am today based on what a lot of strangers said to me, or conversations that we had. Because there were times when I was pretty resistant to a lot of things in my life. And I was not open, I wasn't willing to listen to others. And once I started listening, I started learning. And that's what can happen to all of us. So the next time, or any time, any little situation or any big situation, when that comes up, shift your brain immediately and go, okay, that's not happening to me. That's happening for me, because I'm going to be able to move forward on my path. And what I also know about that, when you shift your perspective around that, sometimes miracles happen. Sometimes people show up, situations show up, opportunities show up. And then the next thing you know, the more you start thinking that way, more good situations show up. And less things happen to you, and you start to see every day in your life that things every day are happening for you so that you can move forward. Questions, thoughts, situations? Anybody have a situation that they were able to kind of shift that and see the gift in it, see the silver lining? Anyone?
Well, in my case, back at home, because I'm going through something like that in my job, where it's very toxic, and I've compromised on so many levels.
Yeah.
And then last night, I was just kind of like, I asked my higher self, and I said, like, I need something to guide me to where, like, show me something. And then you popped up on Instagram. And here I am, and here you are giving this speech, so thank you.
Oh, wow. So you asked for it, and I showed up.
Yes.
And that's what happens. See, that's proof right there. You asked, and I popped up on Instagram. And I believe in this. I believe that when you truly ask, when you ask, you will receive. And I popped up. And interesting, my presentation today.
Yes.
And so it's, it's definitely helping you resolve, because, you are worthy. You are so much more valuable than the environment that you're in. And what's happening is that probably the universe is giving you this probably negative situation, but it's really meant you're so much more valuable out there in the world. And there's a place out there that will value you so much more than where you are now. It's just that you must stop holding on, because you've seen the negativity, you see the toxicity. It's like, why would you want to stay there? So, but you're afraid, because you're like, what if I couldn't get another job? Or what if this wouldn't work? So what happens is that your next step is you need to start looking right now, because the right opportunity, the right position is out there waiting for you. You're the one that has to take the steps. And this is where you should say to yourself, this is now happening for me to move further on my path and into a better place. And that'll show up for you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? A situation? Just a little situation. No? Everybody's good? All right. Well, here's a couple of things I'd like to encourage you to do. I do have a handout that I'm going to give you today, and I'll just briefly review it for you. We'll pass these around. So this will be an opportunity for you to practice this, okay? So it's got like 5 steps, and keep this with you when a situation pops up. But first, you wanna see the silver lining. So pause the pain story. So when something negative comes up, pause it. Shift the energy. Look for the patterns that keep showing up. So if you keep having the same patterns, look for that. And then you can ask yourself the question, well, what am I repeating? Also, ask Spirit for the message, which is what you did. You actually took that step, and something popped up. Because you can ask for signs and symbols of something. You can say, okay, I need to see angel numbers. I need to see 111 to help me make a decision if I should move, to another state, or if I should look for a new apartment. Anything simple. You can look for or create signs for yourself. Also, like I said, turn that pain that you have into a purpose. And ask yourself how you can help others with it. And then trust the divine timing, because there is divine timing. But if you begin to align yourself with the energy of the universe, divine timing will show up for you. And then, again, I gave you some examples of, how to reframe how you feel. Like, if this is so unfair, well, the reframe is, this is showing me what I no longer will tolerate. And that's where I got to in my situation. I could no longer tolerate the abuse or the toxicity in the business environment that I was in, because it was toxicity, and it was not comfortable. And everyone else around in the company weren't comfortable either, because they saw what was going on, but they were afraid to speak up. But learn to reframe your situations. And then also journal. Journal what you're feeling. That will also help you work through the ability to reframe your situations. And, I wanted to give you just a sort of a small reminder, is that you're not being punished, you're being positioned. The challenge didn't happen to you, it happened for you. So trust your path always, because you're being guided. So the next time something negative happens, ask yourself, how is this happening for me, and how can I shift it? And I think you'll be able to turn it around, and you'll see the beauty in it. So, any other thoughts, questions? No? Well, thank you for being here today. This was great. And I appreciate you coming every week. It's really, those of you that come, I really appreciate it. And as I said, one of these days we're going to fill this room up completely, standing room only. So, yes, so thank you for being here. All right. Yeah.